up a little bit today. Surprise, surprise, right? You ever been disappointed?
Yeah.
Ever had an expectation? Or thought, this is what I really wanted, and it turned out to be really bad? Ever had that? Yeah, I've had that. Lots. Well, that's what happens throughout history. And what kind of feels like happens on this day many years ago. Let's watch the scene from The Chosen.
Do you hear that? Sounds like multitudes. This is the moment!
Son of David.
The Messiah!
Hosanna. It means save us.
Oh, Hosanna to the Son of David. Hosanna to the Son of David. Stop! Stay away from us.
We mean no harm.
You tried to kill us.
No one once arrived.
John, Z. I want to hear them out.
If you turn back now, it could save your life.
All right, we're not going to do that.
Do you hear that, Chaplain?
The people sound like they're ready to crown him king.
And for declaring yourself a sovereign, Rome will descend on us all.
I've said nothing about an earthly crown ever.
You're riding a donkey. For those of us who know prophecy, your meaning could not be any more clear.
What does he mean?
Zechariah's prophecy of the Messiah. Behold, your king is coming to you, righteous and with salvation, riding on a
The
donkey.
people haven't even seen the donkey yet.
And once they do, everything they hope for will be confirmed.
It already is. Can't you see? You should be rejoicing. This is the moment that we will all be saved. Hosanna to the Son of David!
I don't stand with these men, but they are right. Raising Lazarus changed everything. Jesus will not be safe inside the city gates.
You are calling for his killing! Don't you see?
Teacher, if you value your own life, tell your students to stop.
I could tell them to stop. But I tell you, if they were to be silent, even these very stones around us would cry out in their place.
What a great clip.
Kind of helps us to see things a little bit better, doesn't it? Boy, I tell you, one thing about the whole Palm Sunday thing is Jesus was incredibly intentional. You can go to the next picture and just leave it up. Was incredibly intentional. It was not by accident that he was riding a donkey. He had sent his disciples ahead to go and to meet and to get the donkey, and so he had made the arrangements. It wasn't just like, oh, there's a donkey, let's ride it.
Just steal it.
It was incredibly intentional. But let's move way back to 1 Samuel 8. 1 Samuel 8 is the passage that Shalish read for us. And here's what happens. The people of Israel had never had a king, and they start demanding and saying, hey, we want a king. We want to be like everybody else. Hey, we want somebody to kind of lead us into battle. We want somebody that's going to help us and be the person that represents us. And they start clamoring with Samuel the prophet. They want a king. And the whole passage, Samuel tells them and reminds them, do you realize that if you have a king, here's what they're going to demand of you. Here's what's going to change. You think it's all going to be hunky-dory. Give me some Cracker Jacks, right? No, it is different. It is going to be, you're going to have to serve this person physically, some of you in other ways. So God had told the prophet Samuel, when he heard the people, God's people had told the prophet Samuel that we want a king like other nations. They were tired of feeling vulnerable. They wanted someone strong, someone who looked like a king, tall, powerful, commanding. So, God gave them what they asked for. And it was one of the worst things that ever happened to the nation of Israel. First comes Saul. That's who Samuel first anoints. Tall, handsome, impressive, but Saul quickly fell apart. He becomes jealous, prideful, and completely disobedient to God. He let fear drive his decisions instead of faith. Then came David, a man after God's own heart. And while David had seen lots of victories and moments of deep faith, he also had deep failures. Committing adultery, covering it up with murder, and bringing pain into his own family and his nation. Solomon follows, known for wisdom and wealth, but he let his heart drift to numerous idols. Marrying foreign wives, turning away from God, and his reign ended in spiritual compromise and a national division. After Solomon, the kingdom split into two, Israel and Judah. And from there, it gets even worse. Most of Israel's kings led the people further from God. Most participated in idol worship, injustice, corruption, and all of those other things became normal. Occasionally, a good king would rise up and call the people back into repentance, and back into the way they were supposed to be, back into the relationship with God. And so they would, every once in a while, experience something great like Hezekiah or Josiah. But it never lasted. The people would always end up right back where they started. Spiritually empty, physically suffering, and divided from each other. Through it all, the kings bring these moments of power and strength, bring these moments of peace, but never lasting peace. They brought prosperity, but only for some, and only for a short while. And worst of all, they could never truly heal the broken hearts of God's people. And it continues for centuries. Every king that came along left Israel still longing. And it's the same for us. Every king has left us longing. We have our own kings. We have kings that we have tried and trusted and thought it was going to change everything. And while we may not have kings per se, every king that we've tried has left us longing. We hope in leaders. We hope in systems. We hope in the media. hope in so many things to fix what's broken. We hope in all of these different things, and they still leave us longing. And every time we're disappointed. Every king that's come along has left us longing. Except one. Except one. And so now we move back to Palm Sunday. John 12 gives us this story, and it says, "Do not be afraid, daughter of Zion. See, your king is coming, sealed on a donkey's colt." This was a big deal because of the prophecy that was in Zechariah. It wasn't just poetic. It's this prophecy found in Zechariah 9:9, and it was going to be fulfilled. The people knew it. Jesus had been intentional in planning that there was going to be a donkey, that he was going to ride in the donkey. Now, most people, if you're going to be a king, what would you choose? I think I would choose like a white stallion. Right? That's what most kings would ride. They would ride a powerful, beautiful horse, especially when they were parading into a city to declare victory. And guess what happens? Jesus goes, "No, I'm intentional about riding on a donkey." And you saw it in The Chosen, how the religious leaders were like, "Oh, you don't want to do that." They're going, "No, this is not good. You will get killed for this." And Jesus says, and I'm sure Jesus is probably more thinking, "Yeah, I know." And the crowd is shouting, "Hosanna," which means save us. They were asking for a king, and the expectation was that the Messiah would come and save them from Rome and save them from all the history of them being under rulers other than their own king and even their own king. Think of who their king was at that time. Herod. That's not a king you want to be in his court. At least I wouldn't want to be. I wouldn't want to be in his court. Their expectations were too small. They expected Jesus to be the king who would fix everything, kick out the Romans, restore Israel, and make their nation powerful again. That's why they wave palm branches. Symbols of national victory and revolution. It stemmed back to the Maccabean revolt, when they revolted and had a victory and restored part of the nation of Israel. So the palm branches were symbols of national victory and revolution. But their expectations were too small. Because Jesus didn't come to crush Rome. He came to crush them. He didn't come to raise up an earthly nation. He came to raise the dead. He didn't come to bring temporary peace. He came to bring eternal salvation. And by Friday of this same week, the crowd would go against him. Their hope had turned into heartbreak. They're seeing Jesus being arrested and tried and crucified. And the nation of Israel, their hope, all the normal people are thinking, not again. Is this Messiah going to disappoint us as well? Because he'll be arrested, mocked, beaten, and crucified. How could he be the king? Just a few days ago, we were celebrating him. We were declaring and saying, "Hosanna, save us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." And the expectation was that Jesus was going to come and do something powerful. And now, just 5 or 6 days later, they're seeing him on a cross with his arms open wide. How could this Jesus be the king? So once again, Jesus was doing far more than they imagined. They had their picture of the king here, and Jesus is here. He wasn't failing, he was fulfilling. He was saving not just them, but the whole world. Jesus is the only king who brings true peace. Peace with God, peace within, and peace with others. Do not be afraid. The king has come. What they thought was a disappointment, what they thought was a feeling of being crushed, was really a destiny and really a huge victory. The cross and kingship of Jesus was different than they had imagined. They wanted to give themselves over to kings and to have victory. Little did they know how much Jesus was going to do that. So what do we do with this? If Jesus is the king, and he truly didn't be the king that disappointed like all the other kings, and he's the one true king, then our chasing after other kings has to stop. We have to let go of the other kings in our life. Let's be honest. We're no different than those crowds. We sing Hosanna one moment, and the next we start looking for somewhere else for hope. Maybe it's politics. Maybe it's money, health, success, perfect relationships, wisdom. Crying, Hosanna, save us, and then looking somewhere else for hope. But none of these can forgive your sins. None of these can raise you from the grave. None of these can provide perfect peace within. Only Jesus can. Only Jesus can. So how do we keep our hearts focused on him? How do we keep declaring him as the king? How do we keep saying and recognizing and declaring and saying, we know you are the king, we're celebrating you as the king. How do we not become like the crowd that turns on him and says, crucify him a few days later? Here's a few simple but powerful practices that might help you. What if you prayed Hosanna daily? God, save us. Save me. That's a short prayer that puts Jesus on the throne pretty quickly. What if we prayed Hosanna in the midst of frustrations and arguments and traffic? Second, worship regularly. Worship reminds us that he's holy and that he's in charge, that he's Lord. Obviously, staying in the Word. Read his story. Know his promises. And then I think we help each other and encourage each other as we celebrate what the King is doing in each other's lives, and we declare and we tell our own stories. We help each other stay focused on the King. But when Jesus entered Jerusalem, the people responded the only way they knew how. They waved palm branches, laid their coats on the ground, and cried out, Hosanna, save us. Messiah, save us. We don't worship policies. We don't worship popularity. We don't worship power. We worship a person. Jesus Christ, the King of Kings. We worship a person. And when the religious leaders try to stuff them and to tell them to be quiet, Jesus responds, look, even the rocks and the hills will cry out. If you don't let them cry out, all of nature, the rocks, the hills are going to cry out and celebrate and worship me as King of Kings. So would you rather that the rocks and hills cry out? Or would you rather be one that worships the King of Kings? Worship is our declaration that He alone sits on the throne. Jesus alone sits on the throne. So when we sing on Sundays, we are declaring Him as King. And we are saying, you alone sit on the throne. Not just over the world, but over our lives. And when we lift our voices, we're doing what people have done for generations. When the rightful King enters the room, we rise, we sing, we rejoice. And we now stand on the other side of the cross. Jesus has offered us forgiveness, resurrection, peace, new life, transformation. And there is no more need to be afraid. It is time to rejoice. And rejoicing begins with worship. So, church, let's do what subjects do when their king is present. We offer worship. We'll raise our voices in song. Because the King of Kings, is in the room. So we've adjusted today because the natural response is to worship. The natural thing that should flow out of our lives right now on this Palm Sunday is worship. So that's why we put the sermon towards the front, so we can spend the rest of our morning worshiping. So let's stand and sing, because the King is in the room.